Back in the studio here for season 4 of Vegas Hockey Hub, and to introduce and to do the first episode of the 2025-2026 season, it is time to do the 2025 Prospect Watch for your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, for a brief introduction, hi, my name is Ian Rachiele. I'm the host of Vegas Hockey Hub, and this is going to be the fourth year that we have been doing a prospect watch involving your Vegas Golden Knights. And we have had a lot of fun doing this in the past. So to kick off the season, we are going to be introducing, this prospect watch for the Vegas Golden Knights here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, the way we do our prospect watch is a little bit different compared to what a lot of articles and websites and other videos do around the hockey world. Instead of just ranking prospects in a list order, instead of just saying, hey, here's the number 1 prospect, here's the number 2 prospect, and then going all the way down to like number 25. Instead, what we do here on Vegas Hockey Hub is that we put it into categories. Category number 1 is your top prospect, the best prospect the Vegas Golden Knights have. Category 2, future NHLer. This is a talent that either by the end of the year or at the beginning of next season, they are going to be in the NHL and playing for your Vegas Golden Knights. Category 3 is players that have potential. These are guys that are very young, really talented, but it's raw talent, and they need some time to develop and really, to have their skills there. And then category 4 is players that just need to develop, all right? For category 4, these are going to be some guys that, they may need to have more tools in their tool belt. Or these are players that are just missing a few things in the minors. And if they get those things done correctly, then they can be elevated the next year. And we've been doing this prospect watch for the 4th year. And it's really fascinating how some players have done the evolution and they have actually been promoted from certain categories as we've been doing this prospect watch. So, yeah, once again, just explaining what we do with our prospect watch. We are not just going to, name the prospects from 1 to like 20. Instead, we put it into categories. So those categories were, category 1, top prospect, category 2, future NHLer, category 3, players that have potential, and then category 4, players that need to develop. So this is going to be our fun little video here to start off the 2025-2026 season here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, here is something that I have to mention before we really get into like the meat and potatoes of this video, and that is the lack of depth that this prospect watch is going to have. When making the script for this video, I realized that there isn't as many top-heavy prospects that the Vegas Golden Knights have compared to recent prospect watch that we have done in the past. For example, when you go back and watch the 2024 version of this prospect watch, I had that top prospect, and we're going to talk about him because he's still here. But when it came to the future NHLers, I had multiple guys in that video. And then, I had a few guys in, players that have potential. And then I had a few players that need to develop, category there. Well, with this one here, the Vegas Golden Knights, and this is because of the fact there is a lack of depth with the Vegas Golden Knights in terms of the prospects itself, there is only one player in the future NHLer tier. But that being said, I also want to mention that because there's only one top prospect, because there is only one future NHLer that is going to be on this prospect watch, that meant that there is more players that are going to be on that list of players that have potential. It means that there is more players that are going to be on the list of players that need to develop. So it's just something I want to bring up and bring to your attention, that unlike previous prospect watch, it isn't as top heavy. There isn't as many people when it comes to those first two categories. And then there's more in category 3 and category 4 for your Vegas Golden Knights in this prospect watch for 25-26. And one of the reasons that this could be is the fact that they do have a lack of first round picks that are on this prospect watch. People who have covered the Vegas Golden Knights, or people who are aware of the Vegas Golden Knights first round pick history. I mean, David Edstrom, he's not here anymore. Zach Dean, he's not here anymore. Brendan Bryson, he's not here anymore. Like, the Vegas Golden Knights have had a history of having a first round pick, being in their system for a little bit of time, and then shipping him away in a trade package, or sending him for a very talented player as essentially a 1v1 deal. And that is something that could be affecting the Vegas Golden Knights in terms of prospect watch. And the rationale behind that, and the reason I'm explaining this, is because, yes, you do have your top prospect. That is Trevor Connolly. All right, Trevor Connolly, he's going to be with the Henderson Silver Knights this year. He had a cup of coffee last year in the AHL towards the back end of the 24-25 season. And the problem that the Vegas Golden Knights have is that outside of him and outside of Carl Lindbaum, the problem the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have is, outside of those two, which are the bright spots and the shining stars of the prospects with the Vegas Golden Knights, the rest of it doesn't have that level of potential that Connolly and Lindbaum have, if that makes sense. Trevor Connolly is your best prospect. Carl Lindbaum is just there when it comes to being among the top prospects in the Vegas Golden Knights system. But what is being noticeable when creating this script, and the reason why the Vegas Golden Knights are near the 25, in terms of ranking for the prospects, in terms of the farm system, going over the NHL for that one, is outside of your top two prospects, it begins to get more not as spectacular compared to what Connolly and Lindbaum have. The way I've compared it is that Category 1 and Category 2, they deserve to be in Category 1 and Category 2. And then after that, it's a reasonable drop in terms of talent compared to 1 and 2. So, yes, just wanted to establish that here for the 2025 Vegas Golden Knights Prospect Watch, is that because of the trades they have made, and because of the lack of first-round picks, because of trades that they have made, the Vegas Golden Knights, in terms of depth on their farm system, is not as great compared to other organizations in the past. And because of call-ups the Vegas Golden Knights have done in previous years, the depth is not as strong as we have had in recent prospect watch here on Vegas Hockey Hub. One last thing that I do want to establish when it comes to the prospect watch, because the top prospect is Trevor Connolly. I expect him to get playing time in the NHL. It will either be at the end of this year towards the final, 10 games of the season, or would be at the beginning of next season after a stellar preseason in 2026. And yes, Carl Lindbaum is going to be a goaltender who is going to get his opportunity. It could be due to unfortunate circumstances like an injury to the top two goalies in the Vegas Golden Knights system, or the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have one of their goalies underperform, and that opens up the door for Carl Lindbaum to get his moment. But one thing I have to mention is that because of the lack of roster spots that are in the NHL with the Vegas Golden Knights, it's not going to allow many of these prospects to get their moment in the NHL. To really establish this, I want to bring this up. Defensively, the Vegas Golden Knights brought back majority of their defensemen from the previous year. They only lost one, and that was because they traded him to bring in somebody else from Nashville. You also have the fact that they signed a few defensemen in the offseason, the Vegas Golden Knights did. So if you are a defenseman in the Henderson Silver Knights, if you are a defenseman who they have drafted and it is juniors, if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, you're not going to be able to give them those same opportunities you would have had in previous years, like for a Caden Korzak, as for example. Goaltending-wise, Aiden Hill, they paid to be the starting goaltender. Akira Schmid had to spend all of last year, essentially, down in Henderson because they had Ilya Samsonov. Samsonov moved on. Now it's his moment to be the backup goalie. Now, for Carl Lindbaum, what the opportunity could be there is the fact that you could be the third goalie in Vegas, or you could be in the same spot Akira Schmid was last year, where you're going to spend majority of the time in Henderson, play a few games for Vegas, and then become the backup goaltender in 2026. I actually think that might be the situation there. But forwards-wise, there is an opportunity or two in terms of the bottom six for the Vegas Golden Knights. There is a little bit of a situation where, depending on how the dominoes fall in the next offseason for the Vegas Golden Knights, there could be potentially one or two spots available, and that is where Trevor Connolly will fit in for the Vegas Golden Knights. That is where, for example, maybe somebody like a Matthew Chatterford could potentially get his moment down the line for the Vegas Golden Knights. So, just want to establish that point. For the prospect watch, you have one person in that category 1, top prospect, and you have one person in category 2 for future NHLer. And that was the explanation as to why there's only 1 and 1 in those first two categories. To officially start talking about this for that category 1, your top prospect being Trevor Connolly. And what is going to be really good about Trevor Connolly is that he has 7, 8 pros compared to 1 or 2 cons as a prospect in the Vegas Golden Knights system. I mean, this is a high-end top 6 level talent that the Vegas Golden Knights were able to draft in the first round. Now, I'm very aware that there was a reason why he dropped in the 2024 NHL draft. And no, I'm not going to explain why he dropped in the 2024 NHL draft. Just like I'm not going to talk about how he got ejected when it came to these, or in certain games in juniors. When it comes to Trevor Connolly, he is a player that, in terms of production, is a very high quality player. This is somebody that his speed, he's a very fast skater. Trevor Connolly is a player that when the puck is on his stick, he is a explosive and productive player, and that's somebody that you can count on. He was somebody that, when in terms of puck movement, very good. I like his hands in terms of stick handling. Now, for Trevor Connolly, the only negative that could potentially hold him back is his lack of physicality. All right, in terms of using your body, in terms of hits, in terms of checks, Trevor Connolly is not somebody that is going to light people up every single game. Trevor Connolly is not going to be a player that is going to be expected to be one of those grinders very gritty type of players. That's not what his type of style is. But I've always said for the longest time, if there is one or two things that you are not the greatest at, but you are explosive offensively, your transitions are solid, your speed when it comes to skating is where it needs to be, you can kind of overlook the physicality, all right? Not everybody is going to be that physical, all right? I've talked about William Karlsson on this show plenty of times. William Karlsson is not really known for, lighting people up in the neutral zone and finishing his checks on players. But that's not how he plays the game. That's not what he does. And Trevor Connolly's the same way. So top prospect, Trevor Connolly out there in the AHL for the Henderson Silver Knights for 25-26. And for that category 1, being the top prospect, that is where Trevor Connolly is for your Vegas Golden Knights. And statistically, for Trevor Connolly, this past season in Henderson, when he played in that cup of coffee I mentioned, the last 6 games of the year in the AHL, he had his first career professional goal in the minors. He picked up a few assists in Henderson. And when he plays about 60 games this year in the AHL with Henderson, this is a player that would be around 40 points at the end of the year as a prediction for Trevor Connolly. He is going to really shine out there in Henderson at the Lee's Family Forum. So for Trevor Connolly, he is your top prospect for your Vegas Golden Knights. Now moving over to the future NHLer. I did kind of, spoil it a little bit before, but there's only one player that is in the future NHLer for the Vegas Golden Knights for Prospect Watch in that category 2, and that is goaltender Carl Lindbaum. And for a 22-year-old goaltender, a guy they drafted in the 7th round a few years back, he has been a goaltender who has been developing very nicely in the Vegas Golden Knights system. And when he entered his first year moving over from Sweden and coming over to North America and playing his first season of professional hockey in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights, and some people ain't going to want to hear this, he outperformed Akira Schmid. Like, production-wise, Akira Schmid did not look as impressive in the AHL compared to what Carl Lindbaum was doing at 21 years old. Now, very aware that the Henderson Silver Knights last year was not one of the greatest teams in the world. In fact, they were one of the most underwhelming teams in the AHL in this past 24-25 season. But somebody that was a bright and shining diamond on that underwhelming Henderson Silver Knights team is this future NHLer in Carl Lindbaum. I mean, when it comes to size, 6'1", just under 200 pounds, when it comes to a goalie with size and everything, that is very important. But the way Carl Lindbaum plays in the AHL, the way that he, has that maturity already to him in net for the Vegas Golden Knights out there in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights, it is noticeable how he is already showing that he has the skill set to eventually be an NHLer, that he has the ability to eventually become that backup goaltender with the Vegas Golden Knights. And like I alluded to earlier in this episode, do not be surprised if Aiden Hill has one of his injury problems like he has had in recent years. Carl Lindbaum will be promoted to the NHL to take a roster spot. Do not be surprised if Akira Schmid has a struggle and doesn't perform like he did in Henderson last year, that they will have a swap of goaltenders and Carl Lindbaum will get brought up to the NHL and Akira Schmid will either just be sent outright down to the AHL or he would be cut and or released. Because with Carl Lindbaum, he is in that number 3 goalie category. And that is where he is in that future NHL. That's why he is in this spot. And he's the only one, I have on this spot of category 2 of being a future NHLer. Because if the circumstances line up properly, or if something unfortunate happens and there is an injury to one of the two goalies, Carl Lindbaum will be in that, passenger seat. He will have the ability to then just be in the right place at the right time for the Vegas Golden Knights and make his debut at the end of this year. Or what is going to most likely happen is like what Akira Schmid did this year, be in the AHL for the entire year, have a few starts here and there in the NHL, and then when they move on from the backup goaltender from the year before, Carl Lindbaum, who will then be 23 years old by next year, he will be the backup goaltender in Vegas by next year. So very similar to Trevor Connolly, these two are the players that are expected to be on the NHL roster by next season. Would be very shocked if they were on this list next year. In fact, if I went to the casino, if I go to William Hill or if I go to BetMGM, I'd be willing to put some money down on the fact that Connolly and Lindbaum being on this list next year is something I do not expect to be happening because of the fact that they are too talented and the right opportunity is going to present itself for them to not be on this list next year. And here's his statistics, by the way, from the past year, just to put them on the screen as a reference point. So he played in just under 40 games in the AHL in his first full season of professional hockey with the Golden Knights organization, had 18 wins and a goals against average of 2.65. And then he had save percentage just a little over 91% in Henderson. So like I alluded to, he outperformed the veteran goaltender that was in Henderson the year that he was there in Akira Schmid. And he actually did something very similar when he was in Sweden, when he was actually paired up with a former Vegas Golden Knight and Maxime Lagacé. And his stats were better than Lagacé's when he was in Sweden. So for Carl Lindbaum, insanely bright future. And if everything goes done correctly and accordingly, he will be a backup goaltender next year in Vegas. And who knows, maybe down the line, he could be a starting caliber goaltender for the Vegas Golden Knights. But I will pump the brakes on that one and just say that by next year, he will be your backup goaltender in Vegas. And since there are so many players in Category 3, it's going to be difficult to really give all of them the proper time. So going to leave them on the screen right here for you to read and kind of process. And then I'm going to spotlight the one person on here that would be Matthew Chatterford. Now, Matthew Chatterford out there in the Henderson Silver Knights in the AHL this past year. And he has been someone who has been steadily growing in the Golden Knights system, somebody who over the past few seasons has really started to gel and show progression at times. But overall, I put him in the players that have potential category for the same reason why when it comes to certain players on this list that are forwards like a Mateusz Sapalev or a Lucas Van Fleet, they are players that have potential. They have some good qualities, some characteristics that do stand out as a prospect. But because they are a forward, it's going to be very difficult for them to become an NHLer at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. The reason why they have potential to be NHLers is because there is a good amount of players on here that I think with enough seasoning and enough time within a year or two, they have the ability to end up becoming NHLers by 27, maybe 28 with the Vegas Golden Knights. But overall, the system the Vegas Golden Knights have, it's just not enough space if you're a defenseman. There's just not much ability for you to get up there as a forward. And when it comes to the two forwards who they just drafted in 2025, they have the potential to be a top prospect once Connolly is in the NHL. They have the potential to be a future NHLer after enough time has progressed, with them either being in juniors, them being in college, or them being overseas in Europe playing hockey before being transitioned and moved over to North America. And that's actually the case for the two players they did draft in 2025. So, I mean, another notable guy, Christopher Seedoff. I mean, this is a defenseman, undrafted. The Vegas Golden Knights brought him in, and he has been gradually growing as a defenseman, has actually done very well with the Henderson Silver Knights. Who knows, maybe he might be a Nate Schmidt or a Zach Whitecloud, an undrafted free agent who eventually earns his spot in the NHL, but that is a little bit away. So yes, there is so many names, 7 players that are on the category 3 of players that have potential for your Vegas Golden Knights. And this is not a bad, category to be at. It just means that you are not a future NHLer by next year, or you are just not the number 1 prospect in the system, but you have potential and you have some good talent and ability to eventually become a future NHLer down the line. And for category 4, in the final category, and this is where you have a bunch of names on here, and that is the need to develop. Now, what this could mean is one of 3 reasons why you are on this category. Now, reason number 1 is that you are still in Europe, all right? You are still in Sweden. You are still in Russia. All right? You are still not even over to the United States yet, and it's been a couple of years. You still are not in the AHL. You're not in the ECHL. So clearly there is something on the development side that is, not having the ability for you to come over to North America and be with the Silver Knights or potentially be with the Golden Knights. Artu Karki and Pavel Moisevich, those are the reasons why they are right there. When it comes to Cameron Whitehead, he is someone who just started his opportunities playing professional hockey in North America this past year. And because he does not have enough seasoning yet and not enough time under his belt, that is why he is on there. Lucas Cormier, he has just lost so much in the last 2 seasons. I mean, he went from being a highly touted prospect back in 2020 to now just, I don't even think that he is going to be, with the Vegas Golden Knights by next year. Maybe not. We don't know. But with Lucas Cormier, just an example where he's just not where he needed to be. It's very unfortunate seeing what's happened to him, his regression as a prospect. Trent Swick, I mean, this was somebody they drafted at the end of 2024. He was playing in the Ontario Hockey League. Now we'll see what happens when he comes over. Then you've got Bowman, and this was somebody who was an undrafted free agent, a guy for the Vegas Golden Knights who was a hidden gem last year with the Silver Knights. But we're going to see how he can develop in a second year being out there in Henderson. And then you have the 2 guys who got drafted in the 6th round of the 2025 NHL draft. And because they were drafted, on that lower level, there's not going to be, much in terms of anticipation for them this year. You're going to have to wait until the next year to see how they performed in their, junior or out there in Europe. And then Ben Hammerling, he has been in the minors for a couple of years now, after being in juniors for a couple of years. And he is someone who is developing, but it's just not at the rate for the Vegas Golden Knights. So once again, going to go through this list here on our Vegas Golden Knights 2025 Prospect Watch here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Top prospect, your number 1 guy, category 1, Trevor Connolly with the Henderson Silver Knights. He should be with the Vegas Golden Knights on either the end of this year or beginning of next year. Category 2, future NHLer, that will be goaltender Carl Lindbaum. And this is a guy that if the right opportunity presents himself, he will either play a few games in the NHL this year or earn the backup goaltender spot in 2026. Players that have potential, this is just, 7 guys who have the ability to become future NHLers at, some point down the line, but they are just not there yet. And then need to develop the list of guys who are just, they need to take some time to develop in the Vegas Golden Knights system. So this is the Season 4 premiere of Vegas Hockey Hub. We're going to upload this to all social media platforms and all the sites that we post to. And follow us on social media at Vegas Hockey Hub. We are going to be posting content all season long. So once again, my name is Ian Rachiele, and I appreciate everyone who watched this video. Subscribe if you don't want to miss anything, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.